Hi, I'm Justin Moorman.
And I'm Katie Thornton, and this is the Re-Education of Schools podcast,
where we have open, honest conversations about how to better understand social-emotional learning, trauma-informed care, the whys behind student behavior, and how to help kids navigate it all as they go through school and life. All right, welcome back to the conversation. Taking care of business, this work is for everyone. I think one of the things that it was a dramatic pause there. That's what you call that in the business?
Yeah.
Is a dramatic pause.
Is that
or I was trying to get you to talk from
I don't know.
the pause.
I was waiting.
I feel like you're constantly evaluating now if I have a pause or what I say to you. You're always like, you're trying to do something
you're trying
psychologically
to bait me right now.
I mean, which is fine.
Yeah.
Just accept it. It'll be okay. No, so this works for everyone. One of the things that we know we come across is that people tend to think about social emotional learning, trauma-informed care, stuff like that when they feel like they need help with social emotional learning, trauma-informed care, things like that. We are less, I think, just a human nature thing probably, but it's a little bit less on our minds in school, in classrooms, education, when things are going really well, right? But the reality is that this works kind of all the time for everyone. It's not just about specific amounts of time or specific groups of people, right?
Yeah, I think huge misconception. I think we have an episode out on misconceptions about trauma-informed care, but a huge misconception that I continuously hear is that trauma-informed care is a special education initiative, or it's special education driven, or only for kids that are in special education that quote unquote are that school age category of emotionally disturbed.
Yeah.
100% absolutely not true. Yeah. I think we're going to kind of talk through why that is the case right now.
Or like that district, right? Like that district, that district's kind of it's a rough district. That's for them. Like they need that. We're in like a better, like this, maybe this district's better or that district's better and they don't need it, but that's not the case.
That doesn't happen here. Yeah, absolutely. I think we debunked that. I think one of our episodes, maybe like 2 or 3, I don't know, was about.
You're starting to forget.
I'm starting to forget
too.
But adverse childhood
experience. I forgot like 4 in, so I'm glad that you're finally.
I saw the sign as the episode. I know that, but we talked about adverse childhood experiences and how it happens in every single community, every single school. In your classroom, you have kids with very high ACE scores. Yeah. It doesn't have like boundaries where they don't happen in other places, and it happens in a gen ed classroom. If you get 20 kids in there, you have kids with high ACE scores in there, whether you note it or not.
Yeah.
So I think when we talk about trauma-informed care, it is for everyone. And boy, have I learned a lot about myself.
Yeah.
A lot about myself.
Well, I think that's a good point. Like it's for everyone. That means not just kids, right? It's for literally us as adults too. We actually just recently had a colleague of ours mention that very fact, right? They were like, all this work really is just as much about the adults as it is the kids, or maybe even more so.
Yeah, I mean and it's your interactions with people and everything. So, anyways, I think that's where I think we need to start talking a little bit.
Yeah. Really, this episode kind of came out of conversations that both of us have been having with people that are in education, right? Friends of ours, people that aren't in the district we work in, things like that. Just as we've talked about things. And this idea that gen ed teachers are running more and more into the realization that that is probably not just like a kid that you might have every 2 years in your class that has a high ACE score count or a particularly tough behaviors that they're exhibiting, things like that. But that really it's seeming to be more and more prevalent, I guess. I don't know that it's actually growing. We can talk about that some other time, I guess. But that they're seeing it a lot more, and that they don't necessarily know what to do, and that then we have, of course, COVID that was like increased the quick spike of a lot of problems all over, and not the least of which was also how these things play out in schools and in communities, honestly, with families, and so. That's kind of where this all came from, I guess, is like that idea that, hey, we're all seeing it more, but nobody's necessarily being trained on it. Man, the training's just slow to catch up in the world of education. And so there are a lot of people that are hopefully listening to a podcast like this and hopefully seeking out some training on their own or, doing more reading on their own or things like that to try to get the information they need and get the understanding they need so that they can help themselves and help kids in their classrooms.
Yeah. Well, you may start through like the tier 1 lens.
Yeah. Go for it.
I'm gonna say MTSS again.
I know. That's why I wasn't gonna go. I wasn't gonna go forward because you had written MTSS. So,
okay.
Which I'm okay with for all you out there. Like I'm all right with.
Yeah. So let's talk through tier 1 instruction through the lens of MTSS. So the first thing is there's 3 components of MTSS. It's academics, which we don't spend a whole lot of time talking about on the podcast because I think there's lots of other great avenues and professional development resources.
Absolutely.
Not that we don't have a lot of training in those areas either. It's just not the forum that what our podcast is about, right? But the podcast is about trauma-informed care, which focuses on the other 2 parts of MTSS. The first one is SEL. Just talking through like what is SEL. I'm gonna let you go. I'm interviewing you now. Talk a little bit about what SEL is.
Ooh. So this isn't from me. I pulled it from somewhere, but I immediately forgot where I pulled it from. So just know that it's not mine.
Yeah, okay.
Like that's important to know. So SEL is the process through which all young people and adults acquire and apply the knowledge, skills, attitudes to develop healthy identities. So that's good, right? To manage emotions and to achieve personal and collective goals. And it's also the process that they can start to feel and show empathy for others, which is we probably talk about more than what people even like, but such an important thing. And establish and maintain supportive relationships, make responsible and caring decisions. You start really breaking down that really long sentence. I guess it looks like a paragraph, but really long sentence. You start realizing like what important things are wrapped up in when we say social emotional learning. Right.
Which is a daily tier 1 practice.
Yes.
This is, I think what I wrote down, SEL is the proactive.
Yeah, it's the thing that we do ahead of time.
It's the proactive piece. So you should have if you do not, you should have a regular SEL block in your classroom every single day, 15, 20, 30 minutes of direct instruction, collaborative learning of what you just read, right?
Yeah, and it's not like a small group where you have to pull in the toughest students in your class and that's who you teach SEL curriculum to.
You would do that at a tier 2 level, the kids that aren't catching it at tier 1, but if you're not doing tier 1, they can't get the tier 2, right?
Yeah. So imagine again, like how many all adults at this point too, like, right? Like we need to have and know how to develop healthy identities. We need to know how to manage emotions and achieve personal goals and collective goals, right? We need to be able to feel and show empathy. Heavens, do we need to be able to feel and show empathy towards others and maintain supportive relationships. I mean, just think about all those things. Those are things that I think historically in education, we have just assumed that kids will learn those somewhere. Maybe, and maybe at like a really young level that was always taught in a more real way, like a kindergarten, first grade level.
Yeah, as a former kindergarten teacher, I would say yes.
But now, kindergarten, first grade, like you're hit with so many academic expectations.
Yeah, it's changed since I've taught, for sure.
You can't just play. And Dr. Biddle, right, has a great episode we did with her talking about like the importance of play.
For SEL development.
Yes.
Right?
And so it was easy, I think, in education world. And nobody's going to say like, oh, no, you shouldn't let kids play. But then but we say it non-directly by handing you a list of all the things you also have to get done, right? So you can't get those other things done and play wasn't on that list. So you cut play, right? And what we were really teaching kids and helping kids work through is how to build relationships, it was SEL training, right? Yeah. But like in real time.
Yeah, and how to negotiate. And so here's another problem. We've taken a lot of that. I think this is what we talked about in our play episode. Taken a lot of the practical SEL experiential type thing away, and now it's all become direct instruction.
Yes.
So that's the other hard part, that we're not having the opportunities for play-based instruction a lot anymore because it's become so, and part of it's federal government mandates, state mandates.
Sure.
Curriculum expectations, state test scores, right? All the things that only in America we do really well, right? That we just test everyone to death. But yeah, those things for sure have been missing. And most school districts would approach this through most likely purchasing an SEL curriculum of some sort.
Sure, because what else do you do? And you have to try to cover it, and you have to show that you're doing it.
Continuity, consistency, great resources out there, right? I think before talking as a classroom teacher, I was lucky to work with a lot of really amazing colleagues where we developed our own, came up with had a committee that had books and things that we were going to teach and found resources and all those kind of things. So if you don't have an SEL curriculum, I am personally just email. I've got stuff I can share out with you that it's not a purchase thing, but just lots of resources out there that you can dive into.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's hard. I think it's hard. Just to talk about like real quick, like a comment somebody made to me when we were talking about this stuff is how at the beginning of one of their school years, somebody was a principal at the school was going over their SEL curriculum and how to use it. And one of this person's my friend's colleagues was like, well, where do you find this? It was their SEL curriculum they were supposed to have been using for the whole previous year. And they were like, now where is this? I've never seen this, before.
Yeah.
And so I think we have these things to check a box sometimes as a district, as a school.
Yeah.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that at like the real ground level, people understand how to even use it the best. And so I think that's, it's telling.
The training's usually pretty light on it.
Yeah.
If anything. Yeah. And it's usually, or it gets jumped on. Well, the school counselor will figure it out. Well, school counselor can't do it for all the kids, right?
Yeah.
So, so the SEL is the first part. The second part is the behavior piece. So what is behavior?
So I think it's a lot of times this is something that comes up that we don't expect, right? In most cases, we're not expecting something to happen. It's not what we think should be happening or what we want to have happen in the moment. And we're going to call that students having behavior, right? So we label it really quickly, but that's really what it is. It's something that's happening to us that's unexpected and that isn't what we wanted to have happen. Really, when you break it down, that's kind of what it is. And so then what we end up doing as opposed to like SEL teaching and kind of being proactive, now we're in the spot where we are reacting to something that has just happened in front of us. We can't eliminate having to react. Like, I know it's going to sound like, as we talk, like reacting is the worst. And if you're reacting, you're bad. Like, we can't eliminate having to react because there's always going to be stuff that comes up that we don't expect, right? Like, that's just, you can't put that many people in a room of any age and expect everything to go exactly how you plan all the time. So stuff's going to come up that we didn't expect that isn't what we wanted to have happen. And now that maybe we weren't super proactive about. So like no fault of our own maybe, but we're not proactive in a way that prevented whatever this was from happening, whatever this behavior was, whatever this thing is that came up. We weren't proactive in the right way. Again, that's not like you did it wrong. Like it's all of us.
Or the kid developmentally wasn't at the point to receive that proactive, right? So developmentally, we know kids are trauma-based, right? Wasn't in the right brain state or, right? All those things that impact that.
And now the reality is we have to respond.
Now we have behavior.
Yeah. So now we're responding.
And I would say if you're looking, okay, now what do I do about the behavior piece? This is the part I think we fail really bad with in schools. This is the part where you have to have like a restorative practice belief system put in place. And
this is the part that I think people want the most help with.
Yeah.
Ultimately, we get the most questions about like, now what am I supposed to do?
Yeah.
And again, a lot of these conversations that we've been having, that's led to this, where we're at now talking about this on this episode, is this idea of like, okay, but like now what am I supposed to do? Because now I'm trying to make good decisions for, 20 to 30 kids. And there was something that happened. Yeah, that was pretty unexpected and felt like a big deal.
Yeah, I'm in the classroom. So we talk about, obviously, unfortunately, academics is kind of like king when it comes to MTSS, right? We spend a lot of times, I think district knows really well. We have systematic things we can put in place. SEL and behavior kind of take the back seat a lot, even though they're the two predominant domains. Why is it so important for school districts to start prioritizing SEL and behavior? Why do we need to do both? Because I think sometimes people do SEL so they think they're doing behavior, or they handle behavior and they don't do SEL. So why do we need to simultaneously do both of these?
Are you asking me right now?
I'm asking. Oh, okay. I'm taking over this podcast. Okay,
no. Go ahead. This isn't what we planned on, but all right. Well, I think just like what we said, sometimes we don't have a choice but to react to something that's just already happened, right? So you have to be able to be trained teachers have to be able to be trained in how to handle things after they've happened, because we can't always be proactive enough to keep those things from happening, to keep behavior that's undesirable from happening, right? But we also have to not just assume we're always going to be reactive. We have to also be willing to say, hey, let's do what we can to help kids have all those things we listed out as far as SEL goes, so that we avoid as much as we can behavior-wise, if that's how we're going to refer to it, right? So things come up that we can't control and we have to react. So it's super important that we're actually trained in those systems of how to do something. We've done a lot of different episodes. Actually, even in the last episode, we kind of talked about how to react
problem solve with kids.
Problem solve with kids. What do we do after something has already come up? All right, so to find ourselves in those reaction kind of situations less, because that's what we ultimately want. We want to like eliminate how many of those reaction kind of moments we find ourselves in. So to do that, we have to be proactive in teaching and leading kids through how to become whole, well-rounded people. And that means that way more than just academics, right? So if we're spending a ton of time on academics and getting frustrated that we're having to also walk away from academics to react to a lot of behavior, the solution, a big solution for that is actually on the front end, take the time, like you pointed out, to have a set time where we're going through some kind of SEL curriculum or walking kids through this social emotional learning in some way. And to do it in a way that you take it as seriously. And that doesn't mean it has to be like not fun, but you are actually taking it as seriously as you take whatever content area you're in teaching that, or teaching reading, or the other 40 minutes of your period with the kids. You know, if you have like a 50-minute class period or something, 45-minute class period, that maybe you take 10 minutes of your class period and not even necessarily go through a curriculum, but take the time to like have normal conversation and walk kids through normal conversation about just life as a high school teacher, as a middle school teacher, right? Those are consistently the people and the teachers that at a secondary level, kids are the most drawn to and are like, I love this person's class, is the people that take the time to build those kind of relationships and that they trust and that they walk kids through those kind of situations. You may not even necessarily have to like in your mind label it as teaching SEL or doing an SEL time. I think it's probably helpful maybe to do that so that you continue to do it. But I think you have to like do that on purpose. Again, like set that time aside. So I think it's also important to like weave some of that SEL and some of those social emotional learning concepts into our academics. That's another way to do it in a way that isn't taking extra time.
Integrated, right?
Yes.
Integrated concepts.
Yeah. We talk about that all the time with academics too. Like, well, let's work writing into math. How do we work writing more into math? How do we work reading into social studies, right? How do we, you cross over all the time. I'm sure there's a phrase for that. What's the phrase for that?
Well, integration. Yeah.
Integration. Okay.
Yeah,
I don't know. Yeah. I thought there was probably a fancy word you
knew
that I didn't.
Well, really like project-based learning. That's the essence of project-based learning, is the holistic.
Yeah, it's across the board.
Where you're meeting like many standards over one bigger goal.
Yeah. But I think you can do that in the course of any academic subject, right? Like whether that's helping kids work in groups, whether that's having whole discussions in a circle maybe and working through stuff like that and just answering questions like that. You can do, the bottom line is you can work in SEL stuff throughout your day as well. That doesn't have anything to do with just like purely sitting down and teaching at kids about social emotional learning and what it means to have empathy, right? Yeah. You can do that in other ways also. And I think that's actually probably the bigger key, is to start purposefully adding those things in to your regular content. That's even probably more important than like just having the set aside time to teach a curriculum.
Yeah, I was also thinking, you talked a lot about, I think nailed like the SEL piece, but the part that the behavior piece, I feel like we don't set up time for people to work through that piece, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of times we have people say, well, I don't have time to do the restorative conversation. I don't have time, right? And that's the truth. They don't.
Yeah, they're not just saying that.
Yeah, they're saying they legit don't have time. So we've talked through like how to make time and all that stuff in other episodes. I'm not going to harp on that. But I do think we've got to start prioritizing the SEL and the behavior piece are very important, because you have to transfer skills over to that natural environment teaching, that net teaching. Is what like ABA would consider it, right? That transfer the skill, like you can explicitly teach a kid an SEL. How do we start transferring over some of these skills so they're doing it all the time systematically? And that's where we really know they have acquired the skill that we've been trying to teach explicitly in the SEL piece. But we're good about doing the proactive piece, but we lose moments of those reactive pieces. We don't schedule times for teachers to have processing time with kids in their
That's a good
schedule.
one.
It's like minute by minute by minute is determined, and we are constantly, we talked about this a lot, go, 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 go all the time, that we don't have any flex time in our schedules to be like, this is time to bulk up with kids to resolve conflicts.
Yeah.
Or process through that. And we've tried to creatively problem solve, I know, within our building to do that. But a time to have staff handle those things, and the staff in our buildings when things come up, or to provide professional development on how to handle behavior. That's like almost unheard of, right? To have professional development on how to handle behavioral things or guidance or any of those kind of things just kind of isn't touched as much as SEL is dabbled into.
Yeah.
So I just really wanted to bring that up, that we probably need that more now than ever. I think that's the predominant need in schools right now. So when you're looking at your school schedule or your building, think about, when are we doing SEL? Of course, we're always doing academics, right?
Sure.
But then how can we weave in or prioritize some time for that behavior component so that we can, when this reactive time comes up, we have a time, space, and place and some tools to actually handle or address them.
Yeah, so really when that gets talked about the most, when behavior gets talked about the most, is just after school, at lunch, right? With another teacher, and you're just like, hey, this is what happened. What do you think I should do? Or this is what I'm going to do. You think that's all right? This is what I did do. Is that all right? As opposed to having, and not that teachers aren't honest with each other, but I think it's hard to like look at somebody and be like, no, that's not what I would do. Like that doesn't probably happen as much. So I think to having like time set aside to actually train people on some of this stuff is
you talk about, and I will say this for myself too, like mental health or wellness, right? Where is heavier on someone's heart? What do they take home within the day? What is the hard part about coming in tomorrow is the behavior component, right?
Yeah.
Am I going to be supported by my colleagues on my decision making? Is my decision making correct? Do I feel like I have a plan? Is this, oh no, what happens if this happens again today?
Yeah.
So this is the part that wears on educator burnout, I think, the most. And how do we correct the education system so that is part of the norm? I don't, bigger question out there.
Yeah, sure. Oh, we weren't going to answer that today?
I wish I could.
See.
Presidential candidates will be on later this year to answer that.
Is that what it is?
We'll work on it, yeah.
Oh, my word. Yeah, you're right, though. That is the biggest thing. I mean, I've worked in some environments where we knew it was really, really tough. Like we knew everybody had really, really some tough situations with kids that needed a lot of help. And had some big reactions to very normal everyday events. They would have some really big, intense reactions. And even in that environment where everybody knew we were all in the same boat, I watched, that was like one of the biggest things, is people really worried about what other adults really worried about like what the other adults thought it meant about them if they had a kid that was having a really tough day. Yeah. Like they took that on, and that wasn't an environment where everybody was in the same boat. It was everybody was dealing with it. Yeah. And I think that's interesting. So, and I think all the more so in, just a typical school district. I think that happens all the time. Yeah.
So I think a thing we get asked a lot is, what about the other kids?
Yeah. So this is really the conversation, the bulk of the conversation that has happened with us over and over and over again. Yeah. Is we get given a scenario of some sort, and this tough thing happens. This kid was screaming and yelling. This kid was hiding under a desk. This kid was throwing pencils across the room. This kid was, cussing me out. This kid was whatever.
Disassociated in my class. Head was down. Didn't do any work today.
Yeah, refused. Slowly pushed their Chromebook right off the table as I was trying to get them to do whatever.
No physical boundaries. Constantly touching people next to them.
Any scenario you can possibly think of.
You're all living it. If you're listening to this podcast, you've heard all this or you've experienced this, right?
So this thing happened in my class. What about the other kids? Because there are a bunch of other kids that weren't doing that thing.
They need my time. I'm one person and there's 30 kids in here.
Yeah, and I'm in charge of keeping those kids safe, which you are. Absolutely. But what am I supposed to do? And we hear that it's either not fair to the other kids, which I wouldn't necessarily disagree with. Like, it's not like it's super fair to have to see that all the time. Or
kids are becoming desensitized to, right?
But often what happens for us, like not just for us, but like what happens in education is something like this. A student has an outburst of some sort, right? We call for the principal or we call for somebody else to come and take the student. The student is gone for X amount of time, 30 minutes. Kid's gone 20 minutes, whatever it is. Maybe you don't see him until the next day when you have that period again. when sixth period rolls back around, they're gone for the rest of the day, and you see them the next day at sixth period. The student is dropped back off in the classroom later. Everyone is basically expected to just move on from that point.
Pretend like it didn't happen. Yeah.
Yeah. And that means the adult probably doesn't know what happened. Maybe you might get an email or a quick 2-sentence summary of what happened. Well, from the whoever had the kid, a principal, counselor, it doesn't matter. From whoever had the kid. You weren't involved in it as the teacher, of any of the solution part of it. The other students, the last thing that they experienced was whatever the outburst was, right? Everybody's, including the student that had maybe the outburst, if that's how I'm going to refer to it, I guess, right now. Everybody's on edge.
Moment of dysregulation, right?
Everybody, moment. There you go. That's a kind way of saying it.
Yeah.
But everybody's on edge. So now you, as the gen ed, whatever classroom teacher, you're on edge because you don't really there was no resolution for you. The other students in the room, they're on edge because there was no resolution for them, and they felt like this is gonna. If you're out there, don't take this the wrong way. But they recognized that you didn't necessarily that you called for help.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying you shouldn't call for help, but they also recognized that it was a big enough situation that the teacher who they trust you overall, and that you had to call for help. So they recognized that it was a big situation. And then the student who's coming back in, who was dysregulated, they are on edge because how's everybody going to receive me? What does the teacher think about me? What do the other kids think about me? And this is, I don't care what age level, this is what's going through people's minds, right? So that's basically what we usually see that happens, right? That's a very common, as you talk to, and that's not just where you and I work. That is, you talk to anybody in any district, probably in any state. That is a common situation
we have
that
lots
I just
of friends
described.
That work lots of places.
Yeah,
right?
That's a very common thing that what we just described. This approach that I just described, right, that most of us experience, this does a couple things. One, it keeps the student who had the tough moment, who was dysregulated, from building empathy towards peers. If he or she never has to sit down with peers and hear how their actions made their peers feel, then why would they ever know? They can have some guesses, maybe. They might even guess more extreme than what it really made their peers feel. But if they don't ever have the chance to sit across from the group, the class that witnessed whatever their dysregulated moment was, and see and hear oh, it made me feel this way. I felt kind of like this. I felt kind of like this. And own in their hearts, oh, I caused that. And this isn't about making the kid feel bad that was dysregulated, but it's about starting to build empathy and starting to help them see outside of themselves, right? Which is also coincidentally the exact same thing that's happening with the rest of the class as this kind of conversation might be happening. Whether it's a whole, group kind of thing, or whether it's a small group thing, or whether it's a, one-on-one kind of thing.
Yeah,
with
and
two
you're
kids.
talking basically processing through a restorative practice.
Yeah, a restorative circle kind of thing. Yeah,
and
it could
some
be
form of a tier level.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be a circle, right? We talk about this a lot. It doesn't have to necessarily be a circle. There's benefit in that, but it doesn't have to be. However you decide to walk your class through talking about what happened. We can't just ignore it. Because if you just ignore it, then nobody's improving from it. We're just waiting for the next time to happen and hoping, crossing our fingers and hoping it doesn't happen. So if we go with that same approach that we described, where we, the kid has the moment, we send them out, they come back later. That's one thing, is the kid, we're robbing that kid of having a chance to build empathy, who maybe needs a more explicit empathy taught.
A lagging skill.
Yeah.
Yep.
Two, what this does is also keeps the other students from believing that their voice matters. And I think that's kind of a big one that we overlook a lot. But I've thought about this one a lot lately, just because I've been in more of these conversations a lot lately, again, from random spots that I didn't expect, from people that, I'm just friends with, and it's come up. I think we inadvertently, for a long time, have taught kids that they shouldn't tell somebody how their actions made them feel. So if you've had a real big dysregulated moment, what we inadvertently are teaching is that kid leaves. They're gone for a while. They come back. Time should have solved it all, apparently. Yeah. Right? Just having time pass should have solved it, is what I'm teaching a kid. Now I never have that kid talk. Nobody ever talks about it. So now as somebody who is, I don't want to say victim is like a hard word, but somebody who is maybe on the receiving end or just experienced the dysregulated moment.
I think victim's fair. I mean, that's what restorative practices would call it, right?
Yeah,
The
sure,
victim or the receiver of the actions, right?
Then me, as in that victim kind of spot, I learn like, well, I'm not really supposed to tell the person how they made me feel. I'm just supposed to let some time pass and then move on like it never happened.
Behind this mysterious wall, this thing happens.
Yeah, who knows?
I don't know.
Who knows what it was?
Yeah.
But what that leads to is adults who do the same. We kind of touched on this, I think, in one of our last couple episodes. That leads to adults who do the exact same thing. I get really frustrated. I get really mad. I get really hurt. I get really whatever. I'm been really offended. Like my feelings were really hurt by something that happened from another adult. What I have learned is that I'm supposed to just walk away, let time pass.
Or go tell somebody else for them to go tell the person how I felt instead of coming and talking directly to somebody. Yeah.
Instead of sitting down and saying, hey, I'm not saying this to accuse you. I'm not saying this to make you feel bad, but I do want to let you know how what you did made me feel. And when you've walked through some situations like this with kids, as we've done many times, what you find is kids, they realize a lot then. The kid that was in the victim role, but also the kid that was in like both sides learn a lot. And that's how we explicitly can start teaching empathy. Because kids from a little kid level to like a high school level, right? Kids are interacting just with each other less and less and less. Like overall, we are interacting each other through screens. We're interacting with each other through, videos that are sent to each other, like
and they're
on
actually
social media.
Finding out that research study just came out this year that this is why we have a mental health crisis at teenage years, because we are forbidding our kids to have any independence out in the world to kind of navigate situations like that. And because their only interactions now are digital.
Sure. So what that means for us as educators, right, is that we have to on purpose more explicitly teach this.
Yes.
Just like if a kid didn't know how to multiply and they needed to know how to multiply and they should have learned how to multiply before, but they didn't. Well, guess what? We're going to have to explicitly teach them how to multiply. We can't just hope they learn how to multiply all of a sudden.
Or punish it out of them, right?
Yeah, sure. So we're going to explicitly teach them. Okay, well, this is how you explicitly teach both sides is not by ignoring and not by just letting time pass and then bringing the kid back in. You brought it up. It takes time. And we brought it up in even our last episode. It takes time. And so whether that's as a building administrator or you as a teacher encouraging your building administrator, like you got to find ways to put in systems in place that allow for time for you as the teacher to be able to walk kids through these kind of conversations. Or if you can't put systems in place as a building, you as a teacher have to make the decision that this is important and you have to sacrifice something else that's on your checklist and take the 15 minutes to go ahead and have these conversations with your class and after a tough moment, after some kind of event happens that's a big event, it seems like. You have to take the time and decide to do it because it's worth it to explicitly teach these kids how their voice matters and how their actions impact one another and how their voice can help somebody shift their actions in the future. Like you start learning that we're all in this together as opposed to it's a bunch of just individuals walking around doing individual things and they impact us individually, but individual, right? Like we're a community. We are not the best at living in community in the Western world, United States. We're struggling with that, but that is starting to shift. We're starting to see like the negative impacts of kind of how we have created this lack of community in an individualistic society. Anyway, it's another conversation for another time, but I think like that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to build in this empathy and you're trying to build in this problem solving as a group to start learning that this matters, that it matters to be able to speak to one another about tough moments.
Yeah, and we talk about, I think we have talked about this before, but I think really the kids, it's tier 1 and all the kids can benefit from some of the proactive, like learning how their brains work, learning how to self-regulate themselves.
Yes. When
I'm starting to feel overwhelmed or stressed or anxiety, right? We've seen so many kids with anxiety lately that just really need to learn how to process and handle and manage their anxiety. Those things have to be explicitly taught. How to resolve conflicts. I think you talked pretty well on that, like how we're modeling conflict resolution, that there are consequences for your behavior. Kids need to see and witness that there's something was done. Like the adults have it. Something was done, that it's safe in here because I can trust the people in my learning environment, and that there are, we as a community hold each other accountable for our behavior and actions, how to restore their community and how to contribute to their community. And then, like you said, empathy and perspective taking. By modeling this in the environment, we get to witness acceptance of others, resiliency, problem solving, and boundary setting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think those things are all really good things for every child in every community to be able to witness and learn, and that we stop pretending that we live in utopia and that things don't happen. We just send people away, right? Of course, and I don't want anybody to hear that, of course, safety is number one. And we adjust kids' learning environments. Some kids aren't able to be in a tier 1 classroom environment because it's not safe, and we make those adjustments.
Yeah.
But there are lots of kids that should have opportunity and access to tier 1 learning environments that we should help problem solve and work through some of these things to provide those accommodations and modifications that they need to be successful.
Yeah, it's hard, and it does take time, and it is awkward, and it's awkward for a lot of teachers for a lot of reasons. But one of the reasons, I think time is a big thing, but I think one of the other big barriers is we did not do this.
Yeah.
And so teachers are good about being like, I remember this from when I was in school. I remember this from when I was in school. So I react the same way. Yeah. It's kind of like growing up as a kid, right? You do the same things, similar things that what your parents did, or you're like, I disliked that, so I do the opposite of what my parents did. Yeah. It's the same thing as being a teacher. You're like, oh, these are the things my teachers did I liked. These are the things my teachers did I disliked. I will do the opposite of those things. Yeah. That's how I will teach. Very few of us went through school and saw things happen or experienced intense behavior and then sat down as a whole group and talked about it. And so this goes back again to training. Like if you're not comfortable with it, which is okay. It's okay if you're not comfortable with it. Yeah. One, I would encourage you to still go ahead and start having those conversations and leading those conversations anyway, because that's the best way to get comfortable with it. But two, seek out training. Seek out ways that you can train yourself and that you can improve yourself so that you do get more and more comfortable with it. It's a skill like any other that you have to practice to feel more comfortable with and to get better at. And but if you don't start trying and you always just avoid it, then we're never going to get better at it. But I think that's a big reason why some of us are so uncomfortable with it. It's because we didn't experience this kind of approach as kids ourselves.
And it takes a lot of years of experience, which we're lucky to have. That kind of makes you feel more confident in what you're doing. Yeah. Okay, since I've hijacked the episode, I'm going to ask you the question. What do you want people to walk away knowing?
Okay. I think I just want people to walk away knowing that the time you put toward teaching students how to have healthy relationships and how to work through like tough times is just as valuable, if not more valuable, than all the academics that you're teaching on any given day. Give yourself permission to teach students about more than just academics. And I think a lot of teachers do this anyway. I really do. And so don't hear me like I only think you're like a robot that comes in and teaches academics. I think a lot of teachers do that. But what if instead of just doing it because it's like the natural flow, what if you started purposefully doing it too? Like purposefully take time and set aside time. Like Katie, you mentioned earlier, like do that at the beginning of the day, end of the day, whichever one makes sense for you. Maybe it's right after recess is a time. Maybe it's right after the kids come back in from lunch. Maybe it's the first 5 minutes, 10 minutes of your period, every period. Maybe it's the last 5 or 10 minutes of your period, every period. You take the time to do that. Whatever you find that makes sense, purposefully do it and purposefully put forth the effort because it's worth it. And actually, again, it's those things that the kids will remember more than anything else. And that I really more and more am believing like those things that are going to determine how effective your teaching time was with those kids is that more than anything else.
Yeah, I was going to say trauma-informed care is for everyone. It's just how humans work. It's research-based. It's really how we're going to create kind, loving environment of a bunch of humans who really love and accept each other. Really, we're looking to change the world and how to handle conflict and have resilience moving forward. So that's it. So hopefully as you see the lens of trauma-informed care, you start thinking more holistically, like this is a tier 1 approach. This isn't a thing that happens in special education classrooms.
No, or
separate facilities. This is
that district over there.
Yeah. This is for everyone in your classroom. So start thinking about, I hope you hear this, SEL and the behavior part, and how are you making time intentionally for both to handle your classroom. So, all right, this is where I tell people to like and subscribe our pages. Yeah. Follow us on YouTube. check out our website. Our website has tons of resources on there. If you're looking for something, there's a resource page and those kind of things that we can connect you with. And then let us know what you're thinking.
Yeah, reach out to us too if you do have questions, because this, I mean, again, in a quick hit kind of episode, like it's hard. But if there's something that you're like specifically, this is what I would ask about, like reach out to us, ask us. We'd love to hear from you.
All right, let's go out and do the work.
Hey everybody, let's keep the conversation going.
Like and subscribe below and keep the comments rolling.
Let's do it.